Hello, class. This is Mr. Vargas, and I am here to review difficult questions, part two. So these were the questions that you guys struggled with the most from the Unit 5, Unit 6, and Unit 7 reviews. So those units correspond with classes, like class design, and arrays and array list. And this review is actually really important because the AP questions, the questions that are going to be on the revised exam that you guys are going to take, are actually about these three topics. So, all right. So again, I looked at your results. I saw the questions that that had the highest percentage incorrect. A lot of these questions, like half the class got correct. There's sometimes even less. So even if you got it correct, make sure you pay attention because I might explain something in a different way. Maybe when you don't remember this, but when you took the quiz, you couldn't decide between two answers. Maybe you got it right, but maybe now I can explain why it was right. So the first few questions are about classes. So over here it says consider the class definition for an item. So we have an object, an item class, and over here, the question is down here. Which of the following code segments found in a class other than item can be used to create an item with a price of 10 and a discount of 25? So we want to create an item with a price of 10 and a discount of 25. And over here, we have three different lines of code where they're creating an item. And over here, this is the instantiation of the item. Basically, this calls the constructor. Now, if you look up here, the code that they give us, we have three pieces of data and we have two constructors. All right, and this constructor right here takes in three objects or three arguments. This constructor takes in two arguments. And so we take in a name, a price, and a discount. This constructor will set the data, the instance variables, to whatever arguments were passed in. That one's pretty straightforward. This one, it's not really much more difficult, but you'll notice that there's an argument missing. This one only takes in name and price. So you're allowed to create an item with name and price. And if you do that, if you look inside of the constructor, the discount gets automatically set to 0.25, which is 25%. All right, so which of these will create an item with a price of 10 and a discount of 25? So let's look at number one. All right, blanket 10.25. That will call this constructor. Item name gets set to blanket. We don't really care about that. Regular price or reg price gets set to 10, which is what we want. And then the discount percent gets set to discount, which will be 0.25, which is what we want as well. So one works. Number two, this time we're going to create a new item, blanket with 10. All right, so this constructor that it's going to call is the one that takes in only two arguments. So that's this one over here. So blanket and then 10. So item name becomes blanket, reg price becomes 10, and then discount percent, if you don't set in a discount, it gets automatically set to 0.25, which again is what we want. So 1 and 2 both work. Now let's look at 3. This time, it's going to use the constructor that takes in three arguments, blanket, 25, 0.25, and 10. But there's a problem. If you look up here, Java can't figure out what these values are. It just takes in the data and passes it onwards. So when you put in 0.25 here, what you're actually doing is you're setting the price of the object to 0.25. And then over here for the discount, so you're putting in a 10 there, you're actually setting the discount to 10, which is actually 1,000%, right? The discount. So 3 does not work. So the answer here should be 1 and 2 only. So that was number 1. Number 2, we have a bug class. And we have a method called getPopulation. Right? So we have a bug class. It has a variable called population. It has a constructor. It has a method called getPopulation. So this does not work. So it says get population does not work as intended. So why? What's the reason? And let me just hide that. But the reason is if you look over here, get population, right? It's supposed to return the population. It's returning P, but that's not what you named your population. You named it up here. Remember, this is your data. The variables you instantiate outside of methods is your data. So you decided to call, or whoever wrote this decided to call population, to have a variable called population to represent population. So this should return population. In fact, I think this will give you an error because it's going to do return P and it's not going to know what P is. Some of you guys might say, oh no, Mr. Vargas, look up here, int P. No, that this can't see that. So this I think won't even run. And if you wanted it to work correctly, instead of return P, it should say return population. So the answer was E. The instance variable population should be returned instead of P. All right, now, so that's number 2. Number 3. So the method count target is intended to return the number of times the value target appears in ARR. This does not work as intended. So why is it not returning the value in ARR? So let's see. We have J equals 0. Okay, so you know what actually will happen with this one? This actually will also cause an error. The reason it's going to cause an error, so look, we have count starts at 0. Then we have a for loop, which isn't supposed to go from the beginning of this array to the last element in this array. And if any element in the array is equal to target, count's supposed to go up to 1. But there is an error. The error is right here. So remember, J starts at 0. And let's say ARR had 5 items in it, right? So that means the first one is item 0. The last one is item 4, right? Because we start counting at 0. So we want it to go from 0 to 4. Because this is a less than or equal to, it's actually going to go from 0 to 5. Because remember, if ARR has 5 elements in it, J starts at 0, it's going to keep repeating as long as it's less than or equal to the length, and the length is 5, so it's going to go from 0 to 5, and you're going to try to see if ARR5 is equal to target. That's going to cause an error because there is no ARR5. I said if ARR has 5 things in it, the length is 5, but the items in it go from 0 to 4. So that's why this is not going to work. So the answer here was, so how would we fix this? We would fix it by changing it from less than or equal to just less than. By changing it to just less than, ARR.length is 5. It's going to keep repeating as long as it's less than 5. So then it'll just go from 0 to 4. So ARR0, ARR1, array 2, array 3, array 4, and it'll stop at that point. And anytime that it found target, count goes up by 1. All right, so over here, so we have an array over here. Which of the following code segments will produce the same output as this code? So over here, you just have to make sure you understand how enhanced for loops work. So an enhanced for loop is just, cuts down the whole int I is less than, I plus plus. They get used a lot with arrays and array lists. Basically, the real important thing to understand is that I no longer is your counter, which means I is no longer a thing that starts at 0 and goes to 1, then 2, then 3, then 4. What I actually is the actual data in the array. So I, in this for loop, when you use an enhanced for loop, I is going to have 1, then it's going to have 2, then it's going to have 4, then it's going to have 0, then it's going to have 3. You don't need any conditions, you don't need any plus plus, it just automatically does all of that for you. So this is going to output 1, 2, 4, 0, 3. So which of these actually does the same thing? So let's look at the first one. The first one is an enhanced for loop again, but this time you're not printing I, you're printing array I. And this is actually going to do something kind of funky. right? So basically what it's going to do is I is going to have 1 in it, right? So the first iteration of this for loop, I has 1, it's going to print out array 1. Array 1 is 2. So this is going to actually print out 2. That's the first value. Then I becomes 2. Now it's going to print out array 2. Array 2 is 4, right? So it's going to print out 2, 4. Then on the next iteration, I becomes 4. It's going to print out array 4. So it's going to do 2, 4, and then it's going to do 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's going to print out 3. So that's not what we want. Number 2, the problem with this one is actually, so we have a for loop, and the for loop's set up correctly, but there's a problem right here. What you really want over here, if you were going to use a standard traditional for loop, you want something more like this, right? Because remember, in a traditional for loop, I has 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is going to output 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not going to output the elements in the array. 3 is what I just talked about. It's basically just like number 2, right? We have a traditional for loop, and I is going to start at 0 and go all the way to 4. But this time we're outputting the item at location 0, the item at location 1, the item at location 2. So it's going to print 1, 2, 4, 0, 3, which is the only one that behaves like the question. So over here the answer was 3 only. All right. So for this one, we have, so one thing that I want to point out here is that there's some vocabulary here that I don't really use that much. They have precondition, and then over here the question says which of the following is the best postcondition. These basically what this precondition means is something that you can assume about the code, and postcondition just means what does this code do? Basically, what happens after this code runs. All right, so let's see what this code is actually doing. So we have an array. It says assume that the array has a length of greater than 0, so there's something in it. And then we have a method called check array. It returns an int. And so then we have location or LOC equals array.length divided by 2. This right here is what I think messed up some people. Usually when I'm looking for something inside of an array, I just set it to the first element in the array. Over here, they set it to array length divided by 2. So the location gets initially set to the middle location of the array. So if the array had 5 things, it would get set to 2 actually. So 5 divided by 2 is 2 because they're both integers. So that's what location is doing. You can in a way almost ignore that. So then we have our for loop, and k starts at 0, goes as long as it's less than the length of the array. So this is a properly set up for loop that will go through an array. And then for every element in the array, right? So array k, we're checking to see if it's greater than array LOC, right? So it'll be initially set to array 2. So if anything is greater than what was at that location, then location gets set to this new location that contains an element greater than what was here. And again, this is going to start at 0 and is going to go through the whole array. So by the end of this code, location should have the location of the largest element. So, and then the answer over here is, returns the index of the largest value in array. Now, some of you guys said, let's see, returns the index of the largest value in the second half. That's what a couple of you guys did that. And I think the reason that you guys did that was because you got thrown off by this. You were like, oh, wait, look, location got set to the middle location. So, but that doesn't really matter. Like it would do what's in E if you had started K at this location. K is still starting at 0. So it's still going through every element in the array. This is just a default value that gets set, that location gets set to. It could be 0 and it would be fine. So yeah, so the answer here was D. This returns the largest value in the array. All right, so number 6. We have an incomplete method which is intended to return the longest string in the string array words. Assume that the array contains at least one element. Then over here it says, which of the following can replace this comment right here so that the method will work as intended? So we're missing a declaration here for longest, and we want to know which of these will work. Now, I think an important thing for you guys to understand here is what is longest. All right, and here's some hints. This returns longest. Well, look at your method definition. It tells you the return type right here. So you know longest is a string. So right away you should know it's not either of these right here, because both of these declarations define longest as a integer. Now, another hint is over here. Longest dot length. We're calculating the length of longest. This is not something you can do with an int. So this is something you can do with strings to find out the length of a string. So again, you know it's not either of these. So we know it's going to be C, D, or E. And so what is this method doing? We have a for loop here, and it starts at 1. Now that's interesting, right? A lot of you guys are used to these starting at 0 a lot. This one starts at 1, and that's going to be important in a second. And if so K starts at 1, so it's going to check to see if the object at location 1 is greater, has a longer length than the whatever is inside longest, right? And if it ever finds a word that has a length longer than what's in longest, well, now longest gets changed. Longest gets changed to the new word. All right. Now, the answer here, now think, it starts at 1. So it doesn't even check location 0, right? So that's your hint right there. And the answer here is D. String longest equals word 0. So basically what it's doing is right from the get-go, it's setting longest to the first word in the array, and then it starts checking every word after the first word to see if any of them are longer. If it ever finds a word that is longer than the first word in the array, then longest becomes that new word. 1 wouldn't work. String longest equals words 1 wouldn't work in the case that the longest word is in the first position, because then it would never check words 0. So the answer here was D. Okay, so over here so this question was kind of a weird one. It really is not like anything to do with like programming logic. It's just how Java is written. It's kind of more of the syntax of Java. And basically, when it's about array list declarations. So we're trying to create an array list called values that can store integer elements. So which of these can be used to create this array list called values without error? And a lot of you guys went with 3, and that's perfectly reasonable, because that's how we've done it this whole time. Array list, we've used integer. I remember this was a little hard because you guys were always used to writing it int, but when we did array list, you had to put in integer as the data type. The reason you can't use int is because in Java, array lists are arrays, basically resizable arrays of objects. And int is not an object. Int stores a primitive. So you just kind of have to know that. So 3 is valid. And a lot of you guys put 3, and then you got a wrong answer. And the reason is because 1 is also valid. And so 1 is also valid. I haven't done it this way. And in fact, this was removed from the list of like the required to know list for this AP exam. So I don't think you're going to see anything like this on the exam. But basically, what this does is it creates an array list of objects. And when I say objects, I mean like that's the master. You know, when we talked about superclasses and subclasses or parents and children, there is a superclass that rules all superclasses, the parent of everything, and it's something called an object. Now, why does object exist? This has to do with stuff that we didn't really get to, and that's not going to be on the exam. Maybe we'll get into it after the exam. But yeah, so to answer this, you just have to know that this is good, this is good. This middle one won't work because array list is an array of objects, not of and int is a primitive. It's not an object. Oh, let me go back to number 7, and the answer here was 1 and 3 only. And there's a little explanation there that you guys can read. All right, number 8. So for number 8, you have an array list called word list, and it has apple, banana, coconut, lemon, orange, and pear in there. And then we have a for loop. It's an enhanced for loop. So that means that this is going to repeat for as many values as you have, and every single time the new value will be stored inside Word. So to do this, you need to understand how enhanced for loops work. You also need to understand how index of works. So index of is a method of the string class, and it looks for this substring inside of the string that you're searching. And if it ever finds it, it returns its location. And if it doesn't find it, it returns a -1. So a lot of times when you use index of, you'll see greater than or equal to 0. And that's because if it's in there, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, or whatever, some positive number. If A is not in here, it's going to return -1, making this false, and count won't change. So what this is looking for it's looking for A. So is there an A here? Yeah, it's at location 0. Is 0 greater than or equal to 0? It is, right? 0 is equal to 0. So count goes up by 1, right? In banana, A will be in location 1, right? Notice banana has multiple A's. The way index of works, it just returns the location of the first occurrence. So it'll return 1. Is 1 greater than or equal to 0? It is. So now count becomes 2. All right. But then we get to coconut. There is no A in coconut. So index of A, so coconut dot index of A returns a -1. -1 is not greater than or equal to 0. This gets ignored and it moves on to the next word. So 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 words in here that have an A, 4 strings that have an A. So every time it encounters one of those, count went up by 1. On coconut and lemon, there's no A there, so both of those times, this would have been a -1, making this false, making it so that count does not go up. So the answer here would have been 4, because there's 4 words with an A. So that's D. All right, number 9. All right, in the code segment below, we have an array list called numbers, and it contains 0, 2, 4, and 5. So when you run this code, what is printed? So over here, the important thing right here, and the thing that I think messed some of you guys up, is the way this for loop is structured, right? We're always used to having for loops that start at 0, and then they use plus to go up by 1 each time. And this one works in reverse. K starts at numbers.size -1. So the size here is 4. So 4 minus 1 is 3. So K starts at 3. And it keeps repeating as long as it's greater than or equal to 0. So it's going to go 3. And then it goes down by 1 each time. That's what minus does. So it's going to go 3, 2, 1. All right. And if the location, so it's going to do 3, 2, 1, 0. If the location of the number at 3 is greater than its position, right? So if the number is greater than its position, then it outputs the position. That's kind of weird, right? So if numbers dot get 3, right? So what's at 3? 5. Is 5 greater than 3? It is. So it outputs 3. That's this over here. So 3. You right away you already should know what the answer is. You should probably trace it all the way through to make sure there's no index out of bounds error, but so it's 3. Then k goes down by 1, so now k becomes 2. So if is the item at location 2 greater than the number 2? So let's see, 0, 1, 2. Is 4 greater than 2? It is, so it'll output 2. Notice it doesn't output the number, it outputs the location of the number. And yeah, so the next one, same thing, same deal. The item, so k becomes 1. Is the number at location 1, which is 2, is that greater than 1? Is 2 greater than 1? It is. So it outputs 1. And then I'm just going to do the last one, right? So k was 2. Now k becomes, so we do k minus minus. Actually, no, k becomes, k was 1, now becomes 0. All right, so is the number at location 0 greater than 0? So the number at location 0 is 0. 0 is not greater than 0, so it doesn't output k, which would have been 0. So it just does 3, 2, 1. And you see that it's 3, 2, 1. All right, last question. All right, over here we have a method called count negatives, and searches an array list of integer objects and returns the number of elements in the list that are less than 0. So this is going through an array called ARR, and it's looking for elements less than 0. And if it ever finds them, count goes up by 1. So which of the following best describes the impact that you get if you go in here and you change the code at line 4? So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is line 4. If you change j less than array size to j is less than or equal to array size minus 1. So this one is this one's interesting, right? So j is less than array size. J starts at 0. So let's say our array was had 5 elements in it, and j starts at 0, right? And so array size would be 5, and this says less than. So while j is less than 5, do all this over here. Now, you know what? Forget about what this is doing. Let's just say it printed out j. So it would print out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Because we said array size is less than 5. Is 4 less than 5? It is. Then j becomes 5. Is 5 less than 5? No, it's not. So it'll output 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's see what happens if we changed it with this. All right, what's this doing? While j is less than or equal to, so now we went from less than to less than or equal to. All right, and then right away you're like, okay, so there's going to be something different. But hold on, because look at this. This also changes. This changes to array size minus 1. So if our array had 5 elements in it, then this would be 5 minus 1. It would be 4. And this time we're doing less than or equal to 4. So j starts at 0. So it would do 0, 1, 2, 3. You would get to 4. Is 4 less than or equal to 4? It is. So we would get 4. Then j would become 5. Is 5 less than or equal to 4? It's not. So it would stop. So these actually would be equivalent. So there would be no actual, it has no impact on the behavior of the method. So this code right here behaves the same. It's just ugly. It's not elegant. Why have an extra minus in there? But it essentially behaves exactly the same. All right. So you guys are gonna do this exact same quiz. I gave you all the answers. No reason not to get 100. Hopefully you watch the video and then just write the answers down, and you should get 100 on it. And Yeah, and and this will be the last of our little quizzes. From now on, we're gonna be doing free response practice. So have a good day.